Welcome to Rearview Diaries. I'm Paul, your host and your driver. This is a very unusual, interesting experience where two complete strangers gets into a small knit space and we start a conversation. Usually, good morning, how are you? Heading home? And then suddenly, a passenger comes in, and then I'm not just a driver anymore. I'm a listener. And also listening to every detail to tell a story. This particular episode is quite amazing. I met a gentleman that woke up 3 weeks later from a coma. And his story has really moved me. And at the end, I will reveal what he has given me, a gift. When I pulled up to get Will, one of the first things I noticed was that he walked with a slight limp. He got into the car and thanked me for arriving on time. I joked with him. Well, being on time is the first step towards progress. He laughed. And right away, the energy in the car felt comfortable. As we start driving, Will began studying the surroundings. Then he noticed two things. First, my car was unusually clean for a rideshare. And second, my accent. He looked at me and basically said, you're not from around here, are you? I laughed. No, I'm originally from California. Then I explained why I was driving. I told him about Rearview Diaries, how I started driving because I wanted to meet random strangers, how fascinated I have become by stories people are willing to share when two people who have never met suddenly found themselves sitting together in a car. Will laughed. He said something like, I bet you heard some crazy stories. Oh, absolutely. Drunk passengers, funny passengers, heartbroken passengers, people celebrating the best day of their lives, people going through some of their worst. Then Will paused and he said, well, I got a story for you. And believe me, he did. Will started telling me about himself. Back in high school, he was an active young man. Popular, energetic, his entire future was still in front of him. And then, in one moment, everything changed. He was involved in a terrible car accident. The injuries were catastrophic. His lungs collapsed. He suffered a major brain injury. He even had a stroke. And then Will told me something that stopped me. After the accident, he didn't wake up for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Just imagine for a moment one day you're in high school, student, living your normal life, and you're thinking about school, friends, graduation, your future. Then you open your eyes, 3 weeks of your life are simply gone. Will had been in a medically induced coma. And when he finally woke up, he wasn't waking up to the life he remembered. He was waking up to an entirely different reality. Doctors weren't even sure whether he was going to survive. The survival was the only beginning. Getting better. Recovery took months, not days, not weeks, months. Will told me it took approximately 7 months before he could return to school and finish his senior year. Think about what 7 months means when you're that young. Your friends are moving forward. Life outside keeps going. But your world suddenly became recovery. Small movements, small victories, small steps. And what struck me while Will was telling me all this was his attitude. There wasn't anger in his voice. There wasn't bitterness. There was gratitude. Gratitude for what the doctors who helped saved him. Gratitude for his family. Gratitude for people who stood beside him. And gratitude simply because he was still here. He told me how difficult those days were. The early days were. There were confusion. fear, doubt. Imagine waking up and having to figure out not only what happened to you, but who you're going to become now. Will leaned on his family. He leaned on his faith, and little by little he began rebuilding. Not the life he had before, a new life. From a survivor to professor. So I asked him, "What do you do now?" And that's when the story took another turn. Will told me he was a professor, an English professor. He had continued his education, pushed forward through his physical challenges, and eventually found himself standing in front of a classroom teaching young people. I looked at him through the rearview mirror and thought, wow, here was a man who was a teenager, had doctors wondering whether he would survive, a young man who woke up 3 weeks with his entire life changed, and now he's an educator. He's challenging students to think. He's sharing knowledge. He's helping shape the other people's futures. And yes, he still walks with a limp. But listening to him to speak, there was nothing weak about this man. If anything, what he went through had made him stronger. The two strangers. As our ride continued, our conversation moved into education, younger generation, life, faith, and perseverance. I told him that I enjoyed talking to young people myself, especially about my experiences working in film entertainment. Will immediately said, "You should come and speak to my class sometime." We both started to laugh. Think about that. A complete random rideshare match. A professor gets into my car. I tell him I'm collecting stories. He tells me about surviving a catastrophic accident. And now we're talking about me possibly visiting his classroom. That's what I love about these rides. You just never know who's going to open the door or where one conversation might lead. By the time we arrived at his home, it felt like I've known Will much longer than one car ride. But then he did something I really wasn't expecting. Before getting out, he reached into his bag. He pulled out a book. He signed it and handed it to me. The title was Getting Better by Will Carter. I looked at the title, Getting Better. After everything he has just told me, I couldn't think of a more appropriate title. This has been Rearview Diaries. I'm your host, Paul. Here's the book that Will gave me, and he actually signed it for me. And it was just an incredible experience meeting him. I truly am so inspired driving and meeting all these random strangers. And then sooner or later, I have a feeling Will and I, once we connect, will become good friends. Until the next ride, please, if you like this video, please subscribe and like, and please leave me a comment. Have a wonderful day until I see you again.